Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Let's do it. Preemptive like. I'm trying to learn more about the lore. I'm always trying to learn more about Britain, and the British government is something that I certainly am lacking on. House of Lords. What is it? And I always sort of, okay, House of Lords, House of Commons, is that like Senate, Congress? But I'm sure they're not exactly, one for one comparisons. I'm sure there are a lot of differences. So, preemptive like Channel 4 News. Let's learn. My name is Connor. If you're new, I'm from New England. I like to learn. This might be, I'm not sure how divisive this is, whether there should or shouldn't be House of Lords, but I'll respect your opinions. I don't know that much, and I want to make that clear. I don't care who you voted for or whatever. I'd love to see all of your comments down there and help me out understand this. Okay, let's get started, shall we?
Here in the UK, you might think that we live in a democracy because, after all, we have elections and we get to vote. But that's only one side of the story. In fact, over there in the House of Parliament, the majority of politicians have not actually been elected. So in this video, I'm going to investigate the House of Lords. Does it still have a place in the 21st century? Or is it just a club for posh old men and rich elites?
The media have a caricature of the House of Lords. They always show the picture of the peers in their robes at the opening of Parliament. You really couldn't make this stuff up. It belongs in the Harry Potter movie, not in the House of Parliament.
I'm on my way to meet a British politician who sat in Parliament for 48 years. That means that he's seen 9 prime ministers and 12 elections. But here's the thing, in all that time, the British public have never actually voted for him to be there. Welcome to the manor of the Earl of Selborne.
Guys, so since this is a topic I'm really new to, my opinion is very malleable at this moment, and so, so just bear with me. I'm trying to learn the best I can.
Hello, this is John Palmer. But officially, he's called the Earl of Selborne. He's part of the British nobility who have inherited their elite names and privileges over hundreds of years. Now he's aged 79 and he spends most of his time here on his 6,000-acre estate in the south of England, surrounded by his beloved fruit orchards.
We can live with badgers. That's not a problem.
We're looking for a badger poo right now.
This is a badger latrine.
And how much of this land do you own? Or how far does it go out?
Not to the horizon, but it goes about a mile in that direction.
Okay. As a member of the House of Lords, he's been able to have a say on almost every new law that's been brought in, from crime to Brexit, banking, the health service, and even the British Armed Forces. In 1971, your grandfather died, and that's when you then became a hereditary lord. So how does that work?
I had to write to the Clerk of Parliament, and I had to show my birth certificate and the death certificate.
Grandfather died, and that's when you then became a hereditary lord. So how does that work?
I had to write to the Clerk of Parliament, and I had to show my birth certificate and the death certificate for my grandfather, and I was duly, therefore, then a member of the Lords.
So what's going on? When people talk about the UK's Houses of Parliament, they're normally talking about the House of Commons. That's where the Prime Minister goes every week to answer questions from other political parties.
Order! Order!
But Parliament
Best job ever. I want that job. That'd be the greatest job.
Questions from other political parties.
Order!
But Parliament actually has 2 chambers. The other one is the House of Lords, and that's where the Earl of Selborne is. Members of the House of Lords are often known as peers, and there's almost 800 of them in total. Now you can spot one of these peers a mile off, because they go by these ancient titles like Earl, Baroness, Duke, and Viscount. And out of all 800 of them, none of them have been elected by us, the public. There are 3 main ways you can become a peer in the House of Lords. The most common way is to be appointed as a life peer. Another way to get into the House of Lords is to become a bishop. There are 26 seats reserved especially for the Church of England. And finally, you can get a seat in Parliament just by, well, inheriting it from your parents. And that's how the Earl of Selborne got in. He's one of 92 hereditary peers who were born into a ruling establishment class and given powerful positions in Parliament.
I've been a hereditary peer by an accident of birth. And I think that I've made a contribution, but I have no case for saying that hereditaries have any more expertise than anyone else.
So if you had been elected at various elections during that time, how would that have changed what you would have spoken about?
Remember, you see, an MP is elected by his constituency, and they are always thinking about the next election. But in the Lords, you're not responding to those immediate pressures. You can take a step back, and you can sometimes promote issues which wouldn't necessarily be very popular for your constituents. But when it comes to the rather boring nitty-gritty of trying to win an election, I'm afraid I've rather lost interest.
Over the years, there have been calls for the House of Lords to be reformed. But is being undemocratic really so bad? And if so, what can be done about it? To find out, we need to dig a little deeper.
If you are writing the laws of the country that you want the citizens to live under, then the citizens should have a say in who you are. I think the hereditary peers have literally had a born-to-rule attitude towards it all. They can only...
Just want to say, still learning, but that does seem ridiculous that you have a role in you are able you weren't voted in, and yet or even like the Supreme Court over here, the Supreme Court isn't voted in. It has to go through a vote, like but the president decides it, and then that Supreme Court and then that, so if a justice dies or resigns and you get the president gets to decide the next Supreme Court member, and then they go in front of the Senate, I believe. Maybe both house. No, I think just Senate, and then they can be confirmed. But at least that, at least someone, the president, was elected and is choosing them. And it definitely seems strange that, I
get this job because of the family they were born into, and that's not on any particular thing they've done. It's based on what their forefathers did, which that's just not the way the world works anymore. So I think it's a real hangover from a different age.
So, ever since 2002, there have been elections for the hereditary peers. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like great news. At last, the House of Lords is finally democratic, right? Wrong. These elections have a little catch. You can only be a candidate if you're part of the elite aristocracy.
Right, hereditary peers. Right, I got that right away. I'm like, hey, you can vote, but it's still got to be one of us, up here.
All they've got to do, you can only be a candidate if you're part of the elite aristocracy. All they've got to do is to write a brief personal statement, like it's university or something. That's all they've got to do to get a seat in the House of Lords. And some of those personal statements are, well, see for yourself.
I wish to come and give my support for Brexit. I have been in farming.
This lord wrote,
I wish to inherit a seat as promised in letters patent by the monarch. All my ancestors, on both sides, have served.
And, as if it's not a prerequisite, he adds,
I reside in Westminster and can attend the House of Lords.
This lord said,
Always.
It's like, I'm not like mentally insane. You're hired.
Willing to serve.
Lord Cadman didn't bother to write anything at all. And the Earl of Limerick, for his personal statement, well, you guessed it, he submitted a poem.
The upper house knows none so queer a creature as the seatless peer. Flamingo-like he stands all day with no support to hold his sway, and waits with covert eagerness for 92 to be one less.
Just to be clear, we haven't made these up. Those people think that submitting those personal statements should be enough to secure them a seat in Parliament for life.
I don't defend the hereditary system. Obviously, you can't defend it logically. But equally, I don't apologise.
Clearly, this system is kind of undemocratic. So can we really call the UK a democracy? And for people like the Earl of Selborne, can he really justify being in Parliament when the public has never voted for him to be there?
No one is seriously suggesting the hereditaries should remain, but we will remain there until they make up their mind what they want.
Hey,
what really angers people about the House of Lords is that it's not just undemocratic, it costs taxpayers loads of money.
That guy doesn't seem that unreasonable, I guess. He's like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense, but I mean, change it if you want it to change, and I respect that.
Angers people about the House of Lords is that it's not just undemocratic, it costs taxpayers loads of money. For one thing, it costs millions just to keep that building up and running. And the place has been plagued by expenses scandals. Most unelected peers can claim up to £305 in expenses every day just for turning up, and a few are given a full salary, complete with chauffeur-driven cars. So I came down to
So only the House of Lords is in this building?
Westminster to meet a peer. Full salary, complete with chauffeur-driven cars. So I came down to Westminster to meet a peer called Baroness de Souza. She joined the House of Lords in 2004 after being appointed by committee, and she went on to become the Speaker. I wanted to find out about why the place has a bad reputation. I mean, you yourself have made extravagant expenses claims at times, didn't you?
No.
So when you charged £230 for a chauffeur-driven car to take you to the ballet?
Do you know how many people were in that car at that time?
How many?
5.
But do you, so you stand by that being your own expense?
It was absolutely erroneous. I was meant to have spent £70,000 on flowers. Okay, that was accumulated over 5 years. In the end, it worked out. I spent about £10 a week. And you know, I would have thought that having a bunch of flowers in your room to cheer up distinguished visitors is kind of okay.
Did you?
I don't think it's like, for me, it's not about the amount, it's about the principle. So again, guys, I'm new to this. I can be swayed every direction. I'm trying to absorb.
In your room to cheer up distinguished visitors is kind of okay.
Did you need a chauffeur-driven car to take you to the opera?
Yes.
Why did you need a chauffeur-driven car?
Because I had with me a Russian speaker of the Federation Council whose security required her to drive in a special car.
Even though it was a very short distance?
Absolutely. She doesn't go by public transport, I tell you that. When I went to Windsor for a state dinner, it's quite difficult. Believe you me, you're a man, you probably don't know this, to wear a ball gown on public transport on a rainy evening and hope that there'll be a taxi there to take you up through Windsor Park. I do not accept that I was in an expenses scandal. There is so much that was not incurred. I mean, have you looked at the expenses of some
I'm sorry.
other, senior...
Can you expect me in a ball gown to get into a taxi? It sounds so...
and hope that there'll be a taxi there to take you up through Windsor Park. I do not accept that I was in an expenses scandal. There is so much that was not incurred. I mean, have you looked at the expenses of some other, senior politicians and senior people in various sort of local government? Have you looked at those?
Sorry, in my opinion, this woman has said everything wrong. Like, every statement, it's like, yeah, but it's not that. Like, this person kind of screams to me, like, no self-criticism. It's like, hey, being with a Russian diplomat who needs to go, or with a diplomat that needs to go in this sort of security service, and you could say, well, you don't have to go with them, but I mean, at the same time, that's somewhat reasonable, it sounds. But I mean, can you expect me in a gown to go here? Have you seen everything else? It wasn't that much. Like, all of that is like not good vibes.
That with
But this comes down to the idea of they're elected, they're accountable. People can then say, you know what, you misused your expenses, I could vote you out of office. But people like yourself can't be voted in or out of office.
When you say we're not accountable to the public, that's of course that's right, of course that's right. That said, again, I would argue that much of what the Lords does in terms of bringing up issues which are really alien to the government in the sense they don't want to address it because it's embarrassing or it's a difficult thing. Like, for instance, female genital mutilation, which for years and years and years was off the agenda. The House of Lords put it back on the agenda, amongst others. They really put it back on the agenda.
Okay, but why did you have to be a hereditary inheritance of that position to make that happen? Like saying, did you see what the House of Lords did? Why does that mean that so it being hereditary had something to do with that. I'm American, guys. I don't like to speak too like shrewdly about other people's politics. I'm sure that's really annoying. Like I don't know all the stuff, all the history, all the maybe there's some kind of ceremonial thing that you still want, but to me, man, that I would be insanely. Oh, no, 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 no. Yeah, the idea that you're not accountable and you get the position in like being rich and being a lord and having children who are going to be very wealthy. I mean, you know, in the U.S., if you're very wealthy, well, your kids are going to be very wealthy and they might not have a title, but and so that's one thing. But to be in that higher like lords class and then be into government because you're in that and you can't be elected, you're not elected, and you can make decisions. Ooh, no. That my strong opinion is that is ridiculous. But I'm American. I'm not British, so I don't know everything. But that's my vibe so far.
Now, we should be clear. Baroness de Souza didn't break any rules over her expenses. And she says the House of Lords is essential because of the work it does preparing legislation. The question is, even though we are a democracy and lots of things about the UK are genuinely democratic, are we democratic enough?
The public doesn't, on the whole, think a lot about the House of Lords. I mean, when I say doesn't think a lot, they don't spend a lot of time thinking about the House of Lords. It's outside their sphere of interest. However, when it's brought before them, as it is being currently because of the political upheavals we're experiencing, I think they probably think it ought to be a democratically elected House without thinking through what the implications of that are. There was a very good census done not so long ago where the question was, do you think that the House of Lords should be democratically elected? And the answer was 95% yes. And then another question further down on the same census was, do you want more elected politicians? The answer was no. So I'm not sure that the vast majority of people don't really know what the House of Lords does.
Well, couldn't that be construed as like overall they don't want more elected politicians? Yeah.
So, is it time to change the House of Lords, or is the UK democratic enough already?
It's a democracy on paper, but actually for very easy changes, we could make it a much richer and more meaningful and healthier democracy if we were prepared to make the changes that are so obvious to most voters who say these are the sorts of things they'd like to see changed.
So there we go. That's the House of Lords.
Okay. From what I've learned from this 10-minute video that I'm just learning about, let me emphasize that, okay? My opinion is this is this is crazy. Like I'm not a big I've never protested before or anything, but if this was a thing in the U.S., even I would be out in the streets being like, "Get the hell out of here!" Like, but I mean, Britain has a long, incredibly long history, and there's a lot of traditions that I'm sure a lot of people want to keep alive, and obviously, I want nothing to do, and I want British people to decide for themselves. But that would infuriate me if that was a thing in the U.S. Imagine in the U.S. where like the Kennedys always got a seat in the parliament, and they can never get, or like Kennedy, just an example. I think of Kennedy as just like America's like royal family. That like they always get to go. Oh my God, that would be. No. So, that being said, that's my take on it so far. I'm just learning. Let me guys know if I'm being misconstruing something, or if something was wrong, or if I said something wrong, or just what you think about it in general. Try and keep it somewhat civil. And yeah, I love you guys. I hope you guys are all doing well. If not, chin up. Emotions are fickle, guys. You'll be good soon. See you next time. Bye.